was talking to a friend of mine this morning. She was sharing with me about her past relationship with her ex, as well as her new husband's past relationship, and describing what was going on in the relationship as they were trying to adjust to this new constellation of relationships and blended families and all this dynamics. Now, this is a clinician who's loads of experience working with trauma, highly talented clinician. But it goes to show how poorly informed psychologists and therapists are about narcissistic abuse. She was unaware that both her and her new husband were dealing with an extended family narcissistic abusive situation, that both her ex as well as his ex were causing all sorts of complicated problems and disrupting the family. And we make a common error when we are in these relationships. We all make them. We make them everywhere. I see evidence of it in all sorts of places. And I can give you like multiple examples of how we make this error. We assume that people generally are well-intended, that they care about others, and that they long to be reasonable or rational. But when you're dealing with someone who has a personality disorder, those assumptions are not true, and they go complete. In fact, it's the reverse. It's almost like you're living in a inverse parallel universe where it has extremely different rules. The rules that you think govern your situation do not govern it. For example, let's take it. You're driving on the road. You assume everybody, all the drivers on the road want to get home safely and they don't want to die. And you know that there's a set of rules that govern the driving, where you're going to stop, how fast you can drive, even how you pass. We assume that people follow these rules because everyone wants to make it home safely. And so we live in this comfort zone of, we'll be rational because this is an investment. We make the same kind of social assumptions in our relationships as well, not just in driving on the road, but we make them in our exchanges with people, or interactions with people. We assume, for example, we don't want to hurt the kids, that parents are going to put the kids' needs first. We assume that we're going to be equitable, and when the divorcing process, we're going to be fair about that. We assume that we don't want to disrupt each other's lives, and that we're going to go ahead and make the best of a situation that didn't work out well. We're going to make peace, move on, and have new lives. We assume that when we move into even divorces or get married or whatever we do with partners. But when you're dealing with somebody who has a narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder or any personality disorder, those assumptions no longer work. It is a frequent question on these lives. People come in and ask me, my son has married a wife and she's causing problems, or my ex isn't being reasonable about the kids, or how do I deal with a sister-in-law who is being completely crazy and ruining our holiday, especially now that we're moving into the fall where we're not going to have any deal with holiday plans. They ruin every holiday plans. How do I make them see reason? Why wouldn't they want to make this work out so that we can have a nice holiday together as a family? Don't they know that maybe this might be grandma's last holiday with us? You think, you see these big pictures and you think everybody would want to participate that and cooperate with that. Personality disorders lack flexibility and adaptability. They don't follow the same rules, and some of them, particularly those with narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, lack a conscience. And as a result, they don't care about the things that you care about. Feelings of other people don't matter. Being nice isn't a priority to them. Being rational and fair and equitable isn't important to them. Imagine that you lived in a world that if you didn't protect yourself, you would believe that you would be annihilated, that the world that you're in is so dangerous and works so much against you that you have to constantly be watching out for your best interest or things are going to go terribly wrong. Unfortunately, that's the world that people with personality disorders live in. That if they don't watch their backs and take care of themselves, they believe it's going to be. Now, is that true? Are you actually that cruel-hearted, hard-hearted? Are you that? Absolutely not. That is not true. But that's their perception, and it's not based on reality. It's based on lots of factors. It's based on neurological differences, childhood experiences, based upon the way that their genetics work and the skill sets they have and the deficits they have. It's based on a whole lot of things like that. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I am a mental health clinician with over 20 years of counseling experience. And these days I primarily talk about relationships, healthy relationships, and spend a lot of time talking about dysfunctional relationships. I'm thrilled you're here joining me today. I'm both live on TikTok as well as Instagram, and I'm happy to see all of your names cross. I have a few rules to this live. One of them is, and I know that those who are on TikTok have already started seeing some of the lives or the rules because I have a mods in the room who are helping managing this, managing everything. And that is, we don't talk about my appearance. We don't also talk about politics and religion, not because those things aren't permissible, but just because that's what this live is not about. So I would love to take your questions and talk about things that you're struggling with. And I set it up today about talking about how we manage relationships with difficult people, especially when it's family members or extended families. I'd be happy to particularly focus on that today, but we don't have to. But I know that's a common question that comes up for people. I will take the question around my necklace. It is heavy, by the way. Thank you for the comment about that. Got it in Mexico, and you would not believe how little I spent on it. Can you hear it's metal? I mean, clicking. It was like $10. There's a great place in Mexico in Playa del Carmen that sells Indian products like incense and beads and jewelry and all sorts of stuff. That's where I picked it up. And I love it. It's very, and I'm sorry, so-and-so doesn't think that they like the way that works with my outfit. Well, I think it does work. But generally, we don't talk about my appearance. But I just saw all these comments fly through about my necklace. I appreciate that. So if you want to ask me a question today, please put a thumbs up ahead of your comment because there's so many comments that come through. I want to make sure that I don't miss your comment. And those who are on TikTok, I have subscribers for subscribers live that you can subscribe. And if I see your comment come through, you go to the top of the line and I'm sure to take your comment. Subscribers get preferential treatment. That's one of the perks of being a subscriber for my live. So thank you so much for those of you who do subscribe. Charge is asked, a friend starting to seem like an addict, using drugs and stuff and becoming narcissistic. Should I go? It sounds like should I go means, Char, it sounds like you're in a relationship, like a romantic relationship with this person. Addiction is a fascinating difficulty, fascinating problem, and it does change people's personalities when they begin to abuse substances. It can even be, yes, definitely substances and alcohol is a big problem, but you can see abuse that's related to even the way we deal with work or how we handle exercise. So it's not uncommon to abuse things that maybe even are normal parts of our lives, or I've even seen people abuse sex. So now, does it create the same personality changes when they abuse things that are normal parts of our lives? Yeah, I actually have seen that. I've seen where what you would see is sort of what we, in psychology, we call it pre-morbid personality. A pre-morbid personality is how you are normally when you're healthy. And then what happens is that we watch what happens when you're in the condition or the illness, what happens to your personality. Usually there's personality changes, and that's what you're reporting. There's changes. With addictions, it does create change, and some of the changes look very close to narcissism. There is this entitlement, lack of empathy for others, extreme manipulation, exploitation, a lot of deception in order to feed the addiction. And it's all about the maintenance of the addiction. Interestingly enough, they find that when people really get well and the addiction comes to the end and they're clean and sober, really working on the program, that their personality does return back to the way that it was before they were like that. So it is not a permanent change you're seeing, Shar. Now, the problem is, how do you get someone to get well? Well, you can't. In fact, your efforts to make this person well, chances are going to make you sick as you try to save them. This is what we call in the field, they have to hit rock bottom. They have to sort of come to the end of themselves and realize that it's not working. And the best way to do that, which is very, very painful for those around them, is to remove your support of anything that supports the addiction. And often it means removing yourself from the relationship, because they have to realize there's consequences to this devastating, destructive behavior. And the way that they know is by your disappearance, by your lack of participation, by your healthy boundaries. That's how they know. So unfortunately, probably you're going to have to set better boundaries to protect yourself. Does it mean you need to leave a relationship? I don't know, but that's something only you're going to know based upon what you're dealing with. But it sounds like a tough situation. There's a question that came in over on Instagram. Let me go back to it. Kaha Recovers wants to know, what experience do I have with addicts who are narcissists, specifically with substance abuse and coercive supply? The last part, Kaha, I don't know exactly what you mean by coercing. Oh, coercing, like forcing supply. That's interesting. It's not uncommon for personality disorders, particularly for, I'm thinking of antisocial personality disorder as well as narcissistic personality disorders, to have what's called comorbid problems. Comorbid means co-occurring things that happen at the same time. That it's not uncommon for example, for ADHD to be an issue for some of them. Now, is the ADHD causing narcissism? Absolutely not. Is narcissism causing ADHD? Absolutely not. They just happen to co-occur. It's kind of the best way to think about it. It's like they live in the neighborhood. They're neighbors to each other, and they show up commonly together, but not always. Addiction's one of the other ones that's sort of a neighbor to narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. They often occur together. Part of the problem is that those who have both of those personality disorders have this chronic state of restlessness and boredom. They are essentially looking for rushes, highs. And normal life, the life the way you and I live it, is very boring to them. It doesn't give them that rush that they're looking for. Substances do that. They do that well. That's why you're also seeing excessive use of relationships, why they burn through so many relationships, why they use physical intimacy as a way to get the rush. Part of it is the pursuit of somebody, getting somebody and then discard them. All of that gives them rushes, why you see this like excessiveness that happens. Like they go through so many relationships. So yes, they often co-occur. That's not unusual. A question, Mia wants to know, can a narcissist be helped? I'm about ready to put up a video. Instagram, you're always behind, maybe like a week or so from where TikTok is seeing. So if you want to see the videos faster, follow me on TikTok. And TikTok, if you want to see additional content, please follow me on Instagram, because I do have differences on both platforms. They're a little bit different. There are three groups of personality disorders when it comes to changing and improving. And I make this comment hesitantly, because the first group is the group that we keep hoping we're in a relationship with, but chances are you're not, because that group is a small majority. So I say this very, very hesitantly, but it's called the 3 rules when it comes to personality disorders. The first group, which I said is small and rare, is if you confront them and say that there's a problem, they often will get worse briefly, maybe push you quite a bit, and then you might see some shows of improvement. Now, what do I mean by improvement? Remember, I said that this personality disorders is a deficit. It's a personality trait deficit. They will have to learn new ways of compensating for a lack of empathy, and new ways of compensating for difficulty with self-reflection, and really not being distressed and conflicted when they hurt somebody. They have all these losses and lacks, and they're going to have to learn new ways to do that. They have to care enough, have something enough inside of them for that to matter, for them to get help. Do you see how unusual, how rare that is? I don't know many people That group, I would say, some of the self-aware narcissists that are on TikTok as well as on Instagram, I would say fit in that category. They've done something that's made them pause enough. Maybe they've had their own bottom that made them realize that they just can't stand themselves. I knew of that. There is a therapist out of Florida who does a lot of work with sexual addiction. He is a self-aware narcissist as well. He says openly, he's been interviewed. I've heard him on a podcast saying, I'm never not going to be a narcissist. I never think I'm going to be arriving. But he said he got to the place where he thought if he didn't change, he could no longer live with himself and was about to take action. That he felt that the person he was so horrible that he was in a bind. And that's what forced him to take this big, long, hard look at himself and do some deep work. That group, though, is very, very rare. I know, being a narcissistic relationship myself, I really hoped my partner fit that group. I tried everything I could. I got us into therapy. We did couples therapy, did lots of stuff. I kept thinking there was maybe new explanation or some new angle, or maybe I'd change or get whatever, right? I mean, there was a lot of work that I did trying to save the relationship. And my guy was not in that first category. Most of us who are in a relationship with somebody who has this disorder does not have somebody who's in this first group. And I know for those of us who are not in a relationship with someone who's in this first group, there's a lot of jealousy. I'll tell you, it feels unfair because I've put the same work in as anybody else who gets to have their relationship preserved. Why don't I not walk away and have the benefit of that? I don't. Most of us won't. So my heart goes out to most of us who experience that. So that's group number one. Group number two, you confront them and they actually get worse. They get worse. And how many of us have seen that? You drag them to couples therapy. They learn more about what's happening, the inside of it. They learn more about you. You go home and then they turn around and they weaponize what they've learned. Mine got better at hiding. That's what mine did. Mine got worse through his deception. He figured out ways to kind of just really ramp up and make me believe one reality when actually a whole nother reality was existing. And he just got way more sophisticated. And he fooled the therapist too. So most of us are in that group. We're in group number two. The third group is the group that scares me. And this is the group that you confront them, you ask for change, and they get dangerous. They get dangerous. It's scary on two levels. It's scary because you're at risk. Now they could become lethal, and that's a problem. Do you know how to protect yourself? Do you recognize that? Are you taking steps to take care of that? But it's also dangerous on a second level because they wear what's called a mask of sanity, which makes them look like they're living by normal societal standards, that they're reasonable people. But they're not. So behind closed doors, you see the more, not always, but you see a little closer to the truth. But the public around you is not seeing it, and they're going to think that you're hysterical, you're the one exaggerating, that it isn't that bad, and you're going to get bad advice. They're going to tell you that you don't need to go filing a restraining order. You don't need a personal protection order. They're going to give you very, very bad advice because they don't see this because this person in public does such a good job. Again, at this conversation I had with this friend this morning, the partner, her partner's ex was so good that this partner actually anticipated what they would do at a big public event, so that when they did it, the partner could say, "See, I told you. Look how unreasonable they are. Look how hysterical they are. They make a big deal about nothing. Can you believe the way they'd hurt me? I tried. I reached," without everyone else knowing that they were being set up. It's wild. It's wild. So which group are you in? Well, chances are you're in probably group number 2 and maybe number 3. I have a questionnaire right now. It's listed on my link tree. So if you go to my bio, actually you don't see it. It's not on my link tree. Oh, but I'm going to put it there. But if you go to my resource page, so for example, if you want to say you're going to try to buy the webinar, I should put my resource page up. I will do that, guys. After I get done here, I will link it in. But anyway, where I was going with this, I have a survey that helps you to know whether or not you're in a relationship with a narcissist, or if you're in a relationship with somebody who's an antisocial personality disorder, or if you got a relationship with somebody who's a blend of both. But I want to add another variable in that it measures, and that is maybe that you're in a relationship with somebody who actually maybe has narcissistic traits, but they're invested in things getting better. So in the next day or so, check out my product link, and it's free. That's free, by the way. It's just a questionnaire that you can take, and it gives you some information. So that might be something you want to check out. So I'm very, very behind on comments on TikTok. I'm going to go back and catch back up. And if Instagram, I'm also watching yours and making sure I'm not missing. Again, for anyone who's joining me, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. Make sure you put a thumbs up ahead of your comment so I know that you're asking me, so that I can make sure I address it. And if it's something really, really important and I miss it, please repeat it so that I see it, because I can get very behind. Rebecca wants to know, she's going through a divorce and he's dragging it out, refusing to negotiate. How do you speed this up? Well, that's back to where I was starting today talking about this. As long as they know that's going to hurt you because they do not follow the rules of civility, he will drag it out, or she will drag it out. They want this to hurt you. That's the goal. The goal is to make it painful for you. Their investment isn't closure. They don't care if there's no closure. Their investment is that they really stick it to you. What do you do about that? Well, you can't really stop it. I mean, the legal system is a system that moves the way that it moves. You don't have a lot of control about that. I mean, how many of us have a lot of frustrating experiences with that? So what your best way is not to let it control you, and for you to live your best life while this is happening. I know that's hard because there's parts of your life I'm sure that are on hold. Maybe there's like you can't sell certain things and you're waiting for that. Maybe you're wanting to move, but you can't move because you can't wrap things up to move. Maybe you're wanting to move into another relationship, but maybe you have ethics around that you don't want to start dating when you're not technically divorced. I get that. I get that this is impacting you, but that's the point. This person wants you to hurt. He wants it, or she wants it to impact you this way. I can't make that not happen. Your only piece of control is how you react around that, whether you let it impact you. Tough. That's tough. Nancy wants to know, how do I know if I'm bipolar or a borderline personality disorder? Please help. Interesting, Nancy. I just read a long list of the differences between the two of them because they do look very close, but they're very different conditions. So for those who don't know what they both are, let me briefly describe them, and then I can give you some things to ask yourself to see what you think is more true about you. But please know that I've not met you. I can't diagnose you. You would have to see a mental health clinician or a psychiatrist who would help you be able to make this decision. But I can at least give you some description. Bipolar disorder is a depressive condition, or it's a mood disorder. It's a mood condition of a mental health problem. It is something that happens to us. It has two components to it. It has the depressive side, and then it has the manic side. Not everybody has both sides or feels both experiences. I know some who have bipolar disorder who are only depressed, and I know some who have bipolar disorder who just mostly experience the manic. Now, mania, what is mania? We know what the depressive side is. That's pretty talked about, pretty common. But people mistaken mania. Mania actually is just a fancy way of saying a lot of excessive energy. Could be irritability, could be anger, might be hyperactive, like almost like ADHD, where you're impulsive, you're doing a lot of like overspending or talking too much or something like that. It could be grandiosity, which sort of looks more like a narcissist, but you think you can do much, or you try to do too much, you don't need a lot of sleep. But it's an excessive energy that's not anxiety. So it's not this fretful worrying thing, it's more of this just excessiveness. It's discrete, meaning it has set periods of time. Now, it could be years, it could be very, very long, or it could be hours, but there's this cyclical nature to it. So you move in and out of that excessive periods of depression and excessive periods of energy. You kind of move in and out of it. There are different types of bipolar disorders, like there's mixed and rapid shifting. I mean, it's all type 1, type 2. You'll hear all of that bounced around. I'm not not a psychiatrist, so I don't really bother with the nuances of that. Borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. This is a chronic state that's a chronic state of instability. So there will be volatility of mood. There's a fragile sense of their ego. Things shake them pretty bad, and they feel very deeply. And when they feel, they don't know how to regulate their emotions very well. So it tends to be extreme, and they're fragile in the sense that people hurt them easily, and they're fearful of losing relationships, and there's just this sense of don't want to have loss and don't want people to overwhelm them. There's just this, their sense of self, their emotional skin is thin, so it gets bumped a lot and affected a lot. Now, how do you know which you have? Well, because they look a lot alike. From the outside, they look a lot alike. Bipolar disorder is something it's a condition. You know when it started happening in your life. You can maybe even date a year, the first time it ever happened. You know when you became manic, depressive episode. It's discrete. And it has such periods of time. And so it comes and goes. Whereas borderline personality disorder is pervasive. It's been a stable instability in your life. You can say, I've always been like this. I've fought with this my whole life. Those are the one big difference between the two of them, is that bipolar disorder responds to medication, whereas borderline personality disorder, there isn't any medication. You have to do more treatment, like learning how to regulate emotions, learning how to regulate how fearful relationships and scary relationships can be, overwhelming they can be. It's more of it. You have to learn new muscles, so to speak, some more psychological muscles, whereas bipolar disorder is a condition that is treatable with medication. For most people, not always. I've met a few people who have very resistant forms of bipolar disorder. So that's a brief distinction between the two. I hope that helps, gives you a little sense of that. But fascinating question, and it's interesting because like I said, I was just reading up on that. How much, and I love this question, Anna, because I've been looking into this, how much of a personality disorder is actually genetic? There are three active working theories on why people have personality disorders. And there's still a lot we don't know, but I can tell you what the research is bearing out. The one that you hear most often on internet is called the adversive childhood theory. It's where we say to people, oh, they had a traumatic background. Something bad happened. They came from a dysfunctional family. We say something happened to this person and that's why they have a problem. That's actually been disproved. Please hear me. It's disproved. There's no research supporting that. And they looked at it in different directions. They looked at it from the angle of, does abusive childhoods or abusive trauma experiences lead to personality disorders? No, there's not a strong correlation. Does not lead. We all know loads of people who've had very bad things happen to them who do not have personality disorders. We also know people who have personality disorders who have no childhood trauma. They've had, and I know it's tempting to say, well, maybe there's something we don't know about, and if they could remember. No, they've done the studies, and there's just not the connection. I think it's appealing. It's an appealing theory because they're good at making us feel sorry for them. They like that because it gives them an out. Well, I can't help myself. I had a bad childhood, therefore that's why I am the way that I am. Well, a lot of us had bad childhood. We all need that break. So please know it's not related to trauma. It's not related to bad childhood. Solid research in. It's been disproved. If you'd like to see the references, I have them. I'd be happy to share them with you. Second theory is that it's genetic. They've done twin studies. It's not 100%. I actually was looking at it. The rates it's called concordance rates. In other words, how often does it occur? If you have an identical twin raised in an identical home, how often, how likely is that twin, or even if they're raised separately, to show the same presentation as you? It runs for narcissists, it's 77%. Twins are likely to have the same condition 77% of the time. For antisocial personality disorder, the rates of concurrence is 80%. Now, it's not 100. If it was all genetic, we'd say it should be 100, right? Because that would be the best predictor of that. So what else is happening here? Well, here's the tricky part. Our brains are very adaptable, very malleable, they're very changeable. When you're growing, especially when you're growing up, in fact, your brain's not really fixed and fully formed and mature until like 25 to 27 years old. In that period of time, what happens to you in your life has effects on the brain. They've known for a long time that if you put a child in a very deprived environment without good stimulation, without good exploration, chance to explore and learn new things and have people talk to them and all of that, they will actually be, their intelligence level will be less than what it could have been if they had been more challenged and had a broader experience and more variety experience. We know that environment shapes us mentally. So the thought is that it's primarily genetics, but it has biosocial implications. So you could have someone with the genetic precursors for it, and then environment comes in and makes that happen. Now, this is the good news, because that also means environment can help shape you into helping learn new traits and to develop the skill sets that you're poor on. So the way to know if this is happening to one of your kids is to ask yourself this question. Does this kid always been this way? Or is this just something new and maybe it's a developmental stage? That's how you're going to kind of know if you're seeing some personality traits that are maybe concerning. But it's always good for us to be raising our children with good mental health, with learning how to cope with emotions, learning how to control themselves, maintain good impulse control, know how to deal with a whole range of emotions. I've been watching a show on Apple TV called Trying. I'm in the third season, and the couple has adopted 2 children who are I would say like ages 6 and 10, maybe 6 or 8, something like that. And I love, because they've been showing a lot about what they've been trying to do to help these kids have better mental health, better emotional health. I just love how they're doing that, how they're really practicing that. And I think we all should be more conscious about that. And maybe we'd start to see the rates go down. It's interesting that the rates of all of this are going up. There are more and more personality disorders. Fascinating question. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And again, for those of you who are new to the platform or maybe just joining us, make sure you put in a thumbs up so that I know you're talking to me. And I'm looking on both Instagram and TikTok. How do you work through, so Claudia wants to know, how do you work through feelings that you are or maybe were the narcissist? Oh, that's, no one's asked me that before, Claudia. It's interesting you're having feelings about it, because most narcissists compartmentalize so successfully that and that area of their brain where they feel remorse and guilt tends to be under functioning, tends to be there's low rates of activity there. So they don't tend to feel a lot of distress, which is why it doesn't bother them to create so much stress, and it just doesn't bother them. So it's interesting that you're asking that question, as if I'm happy that you're concerned about that. To me, that if you are indeed a narcissist, and that would be my first question, are you really one? Because narcissists don't tend to ask that. But my second is I'm thrilled, because that gives us hope that maybe you're in the first category. What I would recommend is that you find an excellent therapist who knows how to work with personality disorders. And you really are going to have to do some searching, because most of them, I'm going to be right straight up front with you, they're not trained. They're not trained to deal with narcissists. So I would really look around, look for someone who understands that you need to learn some new psychological muscles, new skill sets. But it will take sitting with yourself and working through what it means to make amends, what it means for you to have been who you are, and then to authentically do something about it. Now, I want to give everybody a warning who's hearing me talk to Claudia. There are a lot of narcissists who knows this kind of conversation is very appealing, and it keeps those of us who's in a relationship with people like that in the relationship, because it makes us hopeful. So we stay longer thinking that this person's going to change. Claudia, I'm not saying you're not changing. I'm not saying that. I just want to warn everyone around you who's hearing this, because my ex did the same type of conversations, how bad he felt, how deeply convicted he was. But here's how to know the difference. So if you're serious about this, Claudia, that means doing a lot of hard work for you getting really a hold of your behavior that's harmful and stop doing it. For those of us who are in a relationship with someone, the way we're going to know is the person just saying these things, or do their actions actually follow up and show that they mean what they're saying? Because a truly remorseful person will not make you feel edgy or walking on eggshells with them. They're going to be there. And when you have a fear, or when they do something that's similar to a past bad behavior, they're going to be mindful about that. And they're going to do all sorts of work around making you feel safe and secure. Like, for example, say they have a big problem with spending money and have gotten you guys in debt or in trouble financially. Whenever now they make expenditures, they're going to talk to you about it ahead of time. They're going to bring home the receipts. There's going to be a level of accountability showing you that they're taking this seriously. If they get snarky, cause problems, act like you're being too much, or these steps are ridiculous, then you do not have someone who's authentically trying to change. They're just wanting you not to leave. Big difference. Big difference. So be careful around that, because this, unfortunately, this mindset, as wonderful it is to hear it, is often weaponized by sophisticated sociopathic narcissists. So be very, very careful about that. But I hope, Claudia, I've given you some ideas about how you can approach this to getting some work around it. Can I talk about antisocial personality disorder? And thank you, Maddie, for your persistence and keep asking me that, because I do miss them, because there's a lot of questions that pile up here. Yes, I can talk about antisocial personality disorders. I've had personal experiences with them. I grew up in a home that tends to genetically create them. So I know family members who are like that. They're a scary group of people, man. So what are they? What am I actually talking about? We often in popular culture call them psychopaths or sociopaths. What's the difference? Robert Hare, you want to read a really good book about this? Look for Robert Hare, H-A-R-E. Hare, his last name. I think he wrote the book called The Psychopath Next Door, would be one of his works. In fact, I'm going to reach out to Sandra Brown for a future webinar. She wrote the book Women Who Love Psychopaths, and get an interviewer for a webinar. I'm super excited. I would love all of you to hear her work, because she knows a whole lot about them. She's done group therapy with them for years. So who are they? They're people who lack a conscience. That's the easiest way to define it. They lack a conscience. They're different from narcissists in the sense that, yes, they feel entitled. Yes, they think they're special and above you, better than you. But there's a ruthless cunningness to them. And it does not bother them to break the law. They frequently do illegal things. They don't try to live within any confines. They live to their own rules, and they're very self-protective, extremely so. To them, the world is warlike and no one's safe. Everybody is everyone's an adversary. You are an adversary. There is a cold ruthlessness to them, a callousness to them. Whereas with a narcissist, if you just have a narcissist without any sociopathic tendencies, narcissists are entitled and jealous. They're more emotional, whereas the antisocial personality disorder is more cold and emotionless. They don't have a lot of emotions. Yes, narcissist emotions are constrained. They may not show you a lot unless they're being manipulative, but an antisocial personality disorder is more calculating and strategic. They're very strategic. Neither group knows how to be intimate. A narcissist can't be intimate out of fear. Their fear, if you really knew them, then you would reject them. An antisocial personality disorder would say, well, I wouldn't be intimate because that would be weakness, and I would never be that vulnerable. See how they differ from each other? So the big difference in behavior is the callous ruthlessness. The big difference in their mentality is around management of risk. Narcissists are managing shame. And antisocial personality disorders is managing safety, vulnerability. They're not going to ever be vulnerable with you, not ever with anyone. And you could be brother, mother, father to them. They're still not going to be vulnerable to you. You will fully never know this person. But the outcome to the survivors, those who live with these people, both groups are narcissistically abusive. So It doesn't really matter what relationship you have, whether you have one with an antisocial personality disorder or a narcissistic personality disorder. Both groups walk out looking really the same because there is still this exploitive manipulativeness that's happening to both groups. And that makes it really, really difficult. I know that's a brief summary and there's a whole lot more I could say about it, Maddie, but I hope that at least gives you a decent overview of this. How do I teach a teen to notice the signs of public decency and emotional and other abuse behind doors? How do I teach a teen to notice the signs, public decency versus emotional abuse? So if I am understanding your questions, Lil Dreamer, you're hoping that I will be able to, how do you help a teen to know how to see through deception? Is that what you're saying? I want to make sure I understand the question because it's a great question. I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly. So I'm going to move on, but I'm going to watch for your answer. How do you communicate effectively with a narcissist? You can't communicate effectively with them. And I kind of talked a lot about that today. Why? Because there's not rationality, because they're not flexible and they're not adaptable. All those reasons make it very hard. So Little Dreamer, you just answered me. You said I did understand the question and I was defining it right. Wow. You want to help with gullibility and naivete. You want them not to be so naive. One of the best things we can do for anyone in our life is helping them really learn to trust their gut. So let me talk about that because we throw that term out, but I was shocked when I looked into it, really what we're talking about. Our gut system is called the enteric nervous system. It's a second nervous system. Believe it or not, it's tied in. It has more receptors, neuron receptors for some of the transmitters, some of the chemicals that are in the brain chemicals. There's more neuron receptors for some of the brain. I know it's a mouthful today. I'm struggling with how the mouthful. There's more receptor sites for some of the neurotransmitters like serotonin in the gut system than there is in our brain, believe it or not. So as a result, believe it or not, our gut has feelings and it's picking up things. It's a sensory, it serves as a sensory. It reports the information to the lower part of your brain, the more deeper, more primitive part of your brain. So as a result, it's communicating information that comes more as not like thoughts in words or even in pictures. It's more of a sense of things. And it's different than your personality traits. So if you're a person who's like reserved and you really don't like going out in public, so you always don't like going out in public, that's not the same thing. It's more of that edgy, it's like it's not passing the smell test, or something just feels off, or something's making your skin crawl. It's more of a sensory experience of edginess. That's what it is. We need to teach our loved ones how to listen to that better. And unfortunately, we get a lot of messages in our life that urges us not to listen, not to trust it. And actually, its accuracy rate is eerily accurate, very eerily accurate. So I would really work on that, ask them, hey, do you ever have something kind of bothers you, or did you get a warning before this happened that might happen? That might be helpful to kind of get them to kind of learn to check into that. Or you to share it with yourself. Like when I was standing in the line today and that person next to me, boy, they gave me weird vibes. Very, to talk about it. But here's some more other kind of more practical things, because that's all very abstract and very hard. Practically, one thing you can do is watch a reality show, turn the sound off, watch it just watch it without the sound. Then have it taped. Stop, ask them what they think happened, what's going on, who's doing what to whom and why, see if they can pick up the motives, and then rewind it and rewatch the scene with the sound on and see how accurate you are. It's, by the way, something that therapists do just to get better at skills, so we get better at reading verbal cues. So that's another thing that you can do, is just get them to sort of anticipate things, plan, see if they can see things. That might be really helpful. Yeah, so she was traumatized really young, but she's come far. Yeah, she asked questions. That's great. It asks questions about, because what happens when you're traumatized really young, you have to turn the gut off. You have to, like, it doesn't get literally turned off, but you learn to override the signals. You learn not to trust it because the abuse teaches you not to trust it. You have to tolerate a very bad situation despite knowing that's very scary. And the repeated exposure to that is very harmful to you. Vanessa, I'm going to answer your question just because it popped up when I addressed it. But no, narcissism is not related to trauma. You missed the section where I went into what causes narcissism. So if you'd like to see, I do replay these over on YouTube. So this TikTok live will be replayed in its entirety on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time on YouTube. But I did talk about all the current theories of why they're narcissists and including the adverse childhood theory. And no, there's no support for it. I'm going to go back and follow my next question. Can a person be both narcissistic and borderline? That's a great question. Again, there's no thumbs up. Make sure you put thumbs up ahead of these so I know that you're talking to me. Yes, you can be both. Yes. You can be any combination of personality disorders. It's called mixed personality disorder. So it's possible to have someone who's both antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. There's some that I would not say go together. I wouldn't see, for example, a schizoid personality also being a dependent personality. They just, schizoid don't know how to be around people. They're very awkward, don't need to be with people. And dependent people can't make a decision without anybody's help. They want everybody to be in charge. They just see how it doesn't work. But yeah, some of them certainly could go together. Sam Vanknan on his YouTube channel believes, and I think this is an interesting theory. Sam's a professor. He thinks that maybe some of the cluster B is a fluid state and they move in and out of each other, that maybe we've been identifying them as separate and we shouldn't be, that maybe narcissists sometimes behave like a borderline and sometimes behave like an antisocial personality disorder, and likewise for the other two. I've seen evidence of that. I mean, I have seen that that's true. I don't know if you can go so far to say they are really just one condition with all these individualistic presentations or not. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. I don't know. But I do think it's an interesting thought. But I have noticed that if you trigger a borderline personality disorder to where they feel threatened, like you're going to leave them, and they get enraged, they can become awful close to an antisocial personality disorder. Their ruthlessness can be amazingly horrific, and it makes them look like they're a psychopath in those moments. Can ADHD sometimes mimic some of these personality disorders? Yeah, I think that it can. So does autism, and I'm autistic, by the way. Autism has some impairments that are similar to impairments that narcissists do. By the way, ADHD, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, autistic people, we're all neurodivergent. What does that mean? It means that our brains, if you look at imaging, our brains function differently than people's who from a normal population. Now, here's the thing. Let's talk about this for a second. Do you know what normal is? How do we quantify normal? Because we talk about it a lot. So what is normal? Well, if you put, so say you take everybody in a room and you plot their heights. That's like all the men versus all the women. So you have to separate them by gender because men's heights are different than women's heights. There would be two modes if we did both together. But if you took all the men, say that you had 100 men in a room, and you plotted their heights, you would find it creates this nice curve. It looks like a bell, it's shaped like a bell. And we call it a bell curve. And then you'd find that the majority fits into the middle. So there's the top part of the bell is the middle. And there's like segments that go out. We divide them up, and I know probably you don't want to know what the math is, the stats are. It's called standard deviation. So they're groups of people, but 68% of the people fit within the first group, the biggest curve. That's probably what we would call normal. So when you come into these like characteristics like empathy or impulse control or judgment, we all range from really great to really bad, and we would range on a bell curve, and most of us would range in the center. But some of these disorders like ADHD, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, autism, struggle with some similar characteristics, and we range outside of normal. And one of them is empathy. people who, I don't know if ADHD has problems with empathy, but I do know autistic people do, as well as antisocial personality disorders and narcissistic personality disorders. And it's observable. It's brain imaging observable. You can see the difficulties, the differences. But does that make them the same as each other? No, it does not. Just because they share similar traits doesn't mean they have the same disorders. I think the primary difference is between ADHD, autism, and narcissism. Let's just use those three, for example, is that ADHD and autistic people are not about an effort to deceive or manipulate. They're not about exploitation. Yes, they may be kind of blunt, may not be the most sensitive people, may not know how to be, when you're in trouble, to really show up for you. They may kind of suck at all of that, but there's not an effort to be hurtful. It's not an effort to deceive and be exploitive in order for some advantage. There's a huge difference, huge difference. So it comes back to that. It comes back to intentions. I think a great way to define both of these is, what is this person's intentions? Is it to manipulate and use you, or is it just they're bad at social cues and they're not really strong at it? Interestingly enough, I kind of sometimes can suck with emotional empathy. It's there for me, hit and miss. It's not a strong suit. It made me good in the office. So if you told me something super sensitive, I'm not going to break down on you. But I'm very good at cognitive empathy. I'm extremely strong at being able to imagine life from your position, and that really helped me a lot. So I could put myself in your position, but I may not have a lot of feelings about it. That's not uncommon. Autistic people often struggle with even identifying feelings. And when you look at faces, we have a hard time even identifying feelings in other people. That makes it really hard. Okay, I was 50 comments behind, just so you guys know how bad. And I'm losing power, and so I don't have a whole lot of power. So I'm going to answer 2 more questions for today. And then I'll be back on Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'd be happy to hang back out with you guys. Oh, there's a big question. Can a multiple traumatic experience cause a borderline personality disorder symptoms? Courtney, I love that question. Sequoia asked just before, what's my YouTube channel? Look for Kerry McAvoy, PhD. If you go to my link in the link tree, it does have it on there. It's at the top. All my handles are up at the top. It will take you to the YouTube channel. Sequoia, back to Courtney's question. Yeah, I do think that repeated trauma, the CPTSD, can make you look often close to a borderline personality disorder. Sorry, see, that's my phone saying, oh, you're down to 20% now. So it can make you look like that, but it doesn't mean you're a borderline personality disorder. Just because you have some symptoms due to trauma, it doesn't mean that. So if anyone tells you that, here's the thing, Courtney, ask yourself this question. Have you always struggled with these issues, or has they all popped up after the trauma? If it's all popped up after the trauma, it's related to the trauma. And I would make sure you see a trauma-informed specialist to really help you work through that. Karen's wanting to know, what do you say to somebody who's being manipulative and saying to you they can't change unless you're with them? I would say then they're not that motivated to changing, because real motivation to change would change because you want to change, not because you're changing for the relationship. And ask yourself this question. How many of us can lose weight because of events coming up that we want to be thinner for that event? It's not a big enough motivation to change. You're not going to see that big of this. This is a classic gaslighting manipulation. They're making the issue your presence in their life and saying that therefore, if you're not in their life, that it's your fault that they are where they're at and how they're doing. No. I know the old me pre all of this would have thought, oh, that's feels so great to hear that, but it is. Run, Karen, run. That's very manipulative. Very manipulative. Because those were quick answers. Let me take one more. And Instagram, you've been kind of quiet. Hey guys, so good to see you over there. Appreciate that. Oh, so Andrea, what are you talking about, Andrea? I'm seeing your question. Oh, a TikToker. I heard you. Ashley Zaharan says empaths have a personality disorder. but she's a businesswoman, not a therapist. Yeah, good catch on that. It is bad for her to stigmatize empaths. It is. I agree. It's inappropriate. There's a lot about empathy that we really don't understand well. I know that what people struggle about empathic people is that having a lot of empathy, and I said I struggle with emotional empathy, but here's another one I'm really good at, and I think a lot of people who are empaths have this problem too. You read the room too well, and you're not reading the good places, the positive experiences. You're experiencing the negative ones. So if someone, I mean, I meet anybody, I can tell you their core issue. I pick all that up. I can't not pick it up. Now, why am I good at that? I don't know. I mean, there's lots of reasons why I'm probably good at that, but it's uncomfortable. I don't like it, actually. So it's painful. Where I'm leading with that is people who are highly sensitive like that then say, please don't overwhelm me. Don't bring your stuff to me because I can't protect myself well emotionally from it. It's too much for me. And I think those around us hear that and say, oh, they're asking for special treatment. They think they're different. They're better than the rest of us. What they don't know is we're dealing with pain. It's emotional pain and we're trying to control it. So I think that's why there's some stigmatization of empaths, is just because of the anger around that. It's not fair. It's not right. There's just not enough research, honestly. I really like going into the research of things, and it's just not enough research for us to understand all of this. I know highly sensitive person has been bounced around out there, but again, there's not a lot of repeated work on it for us to know more. So, I would say empaths exist, but I would say we're really describing something that we don't have a good handle on it, and we don't really know a lot about it because there's not the hard work going into it, because it's a highly complex concept, highly complex. It's hard to research, honestly, very hard to. How do you know? Oh, I'm going to take this as the last question. This is an awesome last question to end with today. How do I know that you have a good therapist? Watch the words they use and how they understand things. Have they ever heard of narcissistic abuse? Do they understand the fact that a relationship can cause a person to deteriorate and have powerful negative consequences? Are they very sensitive about how they handle control? Do they blame you for what went wrong when you were being exploited, manipulative, and deceived? Do they understand that that can happen and has terrible effects on the person who's experiencing it? Do they know words like betrayal trauma and trauma informed? Those are the things that I would ask. I would interview anybody I was going to meet for therapy. I would interview, definitely interview. Yeah, be very, very careful. I hate to tell you guys, the amount of therapists who have education on this topic is thin. It's thin. There's not a lot. You have to be aware of that, and you have to be your best advocate. This was wonderful hanging out with you guys today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pop over to YouTube now and watch last week's with whoever wants to be there with me at 2 o'clock. And I will be back here on Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on both TikTok and Instagram. And I appreciate you so much. Guys, I crossed over 90,000 this weekend. Thank you. It's all because of you. I appreciate you so much. So, bye-bye.